Yeah, all right. What's up, gamers? Don't pay too much attention to this. Just trying this out, seeing how it fits, seeing how it feels, seeing how it vibes. As you can see behind me, is it any surprise that a man with a messy desk also has a messy house? It sure says something about society. I'm gonna put a joker right here. Anyway, hello, Octa children. It's your big fat Octa dad here to tell you that we're gonna do the parts video tonight. Tonight, we're gonna do it. So this one's been a long time coming, and I kind of worry that, much like a man who's maybe talked up his game a lot to a female friend of his, that now that he's at the big show, as it were, he might not perform. Because honestly, after making a song using parts, I feel like I have gotten 10 times better as an Octatrack user. I've leveled up. But I don't know how much of it is that interesting if you already know what parts are or what they do. This is not going to be a super grand insight video. It's going to be kind of a half track breakdown video, half look at this really obvious thing I learned, and maybe we'll grow smarter through it all together. But first, crucially, we should talk about what the fuck parts are. And I have to come closer. I have to level with you for a minute here. Holy Christ, without glasses, I am quite an unholy visage. I read the manual. Yeah. Did you know there's a manual for this thing? I read it. And it's illuminating. Much like this new lighting setup I have. Can't make that not reflect there. Can't make that not reflect. You might say lift the light higher. I don't wanna. I read the manual, and I learned what parts are, really. And they were what I thought they were, but hopefully I can explain it without making a really obvious, dumb blunder. So, let's get right into the video. I don't know why, of all people, I chose to channel Keemstar there. Maybe because I hate myself as much as I hate that dude. I don't know. Let's just fucking talk about parts, right? Okay. So, my wife's just gonna come grab the Switch real quick. Hello, my wife. Welcome to the show. You need to understand the architecture of the Octatrack, the structure of the way things are sort of layered, the hierarchy, I guess, of the different parts of an Octatrack. And what I mean by that, I don't know why my words are sucking so bad. What I mean by that is there are levels, right? So at the top level, you have a set, and that's the first thing you make when you turn on your Octatrack. And it contains all your projects, and you can have multiple sets. Don't ask me why. I've never had the need for it, so I've never tried to learn, and I won't ever try to learn. In your sets, you have projects, and in your projects, you have banks, and then under banks, you have patterns, and then there's scenes. Crucially, you might be wondering, you didn't say parts, and I'm watching a video about parts, so what the fuck is up with that? Parts are interesting. There are 4 parts per bank. And if you remember, we go banks and then patterns. So each bank has 16 patterns, and there are 16 banks. So that's a lot of patterns, right? Each bank has 4 parts, and any of those 4 parts can be assigned to a pattern. And so if that's confusing to you, don't worry. I don't blame you for being confused by that, because when I first read that, I was like, okay, what the fuck does that actually mean, though? And what it means is that by default, pattern 1 and all patterns are going to be assigned to, let's hit the part menu here, part 1. But if we click over here to pattern 2, you can see that my part here changes, and this is assigned to part 2. So each pattern, you can choose to assign it to any of those 4 parts. So the significance of this, to understand it, you need to understand what is in a part. And what's in a part is all the information about machines. So here we have 6 flex machines, a master, and a through machine. That's part 1. And if you see, if I go to part 2, does that change? It does. I have 7 flex machines. So you can see that right away we found a usage for a part. Parts contain everything about machines. It contains what kind of machine you have assigned to tracks. It contains the effects that are on those tracks. and the sort of parameter changes that you've made to them, etc., etc. Parts also contain scenes. So in part 1, you have 16 scenes. In part 2, you have 16 completely different, independent, no needing a man-ass scenes. So we know that parts contain machine information about what machines we have and the effects parameters on those tracks, and that it contains scenes. So how do you apply that to actual music making, right? We're just going to start with the super obvious. You can use parts. Now, stay with me here. See if you can keep up, okay? You can use parts to have different parts in your track. So, subscribe. So yeah, you could use part 1 as an intro, right? You could have, for instance, a shit ton of long samples in static machines if you wanted to, that are weird loops or whatever, meandering nonsense bullshit. Pattern 2 could be your verse. And in your verse, you could have nothing but flex machines and just use it like a large dig attack, right? Just a bunch of one-shot samples, right? And then part 3, you could have a chorus. You could ramp up the energy a little bit. Maybe you want a through machine to play your beautiful synth that always sits off in the corner and does nothing. And part 4, you could have an outro. Super baseline stuff. That is, in essence, what I've done with this project here. And so I think it would be a little convoluted to go through a complete track breakdown of this project. I think I might do that for patrons, maybe, if there's interest in that. But I do think that kind of explaining the different ways that I used parts could be helpful, because for me, it was incredibly helpful to learn how parts worked and the different ways I could use them by just making a track with them, right? Just telling myself, I'm going to use all 4 parts one way or another. And if it's shit, but at least I'll learn something, right? And so what I have here is pattern 1, assigned to part 1, and it's essentially, like I said, an intro. I have this really cool vocal sample from Dr. Cornell West that was given to me by a patron, Null Style. Shout out to Null Style. Thank you for your support. As an Octa teenager, you could have chosen to be rebellious and tell me that I'm not your real dad, but you haven't. You surprised me with adoption papers, didn't you? Filmed it, put it on Facebook. Got a lot of shares. People saying goals, right? Anyway, it's a really cool sample, and I knew that I wanted to have it in the intro, but then of course you don't need it playing through the entire song, and that takes us to part 2. So let's listen to part 1, and we'll see what's going on.
The important thing is being faithful unto death. You see, if people recognize you're going to be faithful unto death, they can buy you off. You got to be faithful unto death, not just in life, but unto death.
So you can see there that there's kind of a lot going on. And again, I don't want to get into a whole breakdown of everything that's happening, but it's very intro, right? A lot of risers, a lot of weird textural effects, that vocal sample really setting the mood. So that's great. Obviously, if I move on to pattern 2, and pattern 2 is still assigned to part 1, there's not a lot of directions for me to go, right? Because so many of these tracks are dedicated to risers. 1 is dedicated to that sample. I don't have any room for my big 808, right? I did put 808s on my Octatrack device. All it took was my children harassing me. Why don't you put 808s on your Octatrack, Dad? Put 808s on your Octatrack. I did do it. And it's good, and I made a good song. So shut up about it. So now we go to pattern 2. And pattern 2 is like a verse. To put it in less singer-songwriter-y terms, it's like a drop, right? So that intro, you can tell it's building to something, right? Well, this is the payoff to that. So let's listen. Ton of different stuff going on compared to part 1. We have drum samples, crucially. We have the 808. And so it just easily makes progression happen. It takes you from pattern 1 to pattern 2, literally from part 1 of a song to part 2 of a song. Super baseline, very simple, I think. So where do we go from here? I didn't really do a chorus so much as, because, typically like a chorus in this instance would be like a hook, right? Yo, my posture is so bad and my back is fucking killing me. Any weak backs in the chat? Any weak lower backs? Sound off if you got a weak back. It's not good. My posture's too virgin. I need to chat up. Part 3. I chose to go more the route of a breakdown. I kept most things the same, but since parts contain machine information, I copied everything over and then I pitched the main sample up a bunch, since I can do that now. Because if you do that across multiple patterns in the same part, remember that machine assignments are attached to the part. So if you're in part 1 all the way across, if you make a change on pattern 6 to like some effect or to the way you're processing a sample, it's going to affect every single pattern that's assigned to that part. So if you change parts, you don't have to worry about that. Oh, it's here. Sorry. The layout of these patterns is a little weird because I was optimizing it for performance, but this is part 3 of the track. So I've pitched it up and it creates this cool kind of breakdown that sounds like this. And we carry on. So what's happening there? We're in part 3. Some differences here are obviously, like I said, sort of exploiting the fact that we can process the same samples differently because the machine parameters are assigned to parts and this is a different part. So that's incredibly useful. And you could take it further than I did by processing a sample in vastly different ways, right? I just pitched it up because that's what you do in trap, right? You pitch it up, you pitch it down, you pitch it all around. So that's what I did there. Another thing that's going on, I believe, is I've changed the effects on my master track. And now this is super useful, especially to someone like me who is obsessed with scene changes and using the crossfader, because it immediately diversifies the way that you can do your performance. Because since we're in a new part, we have all new scenes. And since we have all new scenes, we can assign those scenes to be specific to these new effects that we've assigned to our master. So rather than having a high pass into a reverb, I have a high pass in sample reduction here, and it just changes the character of a turnaround or a transition and kind of smooths the transition back to either part 2 of a track or part 1, and that's incredibly useful. I keep telling myself that every time I start a video that I'm going to be way more organized. It's so hard to do like time codes in the description because it's like, I don't know, I'm talking about this thing for 3 seconds, then I hop over here and then I'm back, and you can't pin me down except for my wife, who did pin me down because I'm married, dog. Married. Can I get my wife to sound off in the chat?
What?
Sound off.
Okay.
Say, I married him.
I married him.
Enthusiastically, too. Willingly, I promise. They make you say that. They're like, are you here of your own accord? It's like, no, am I right, fellas? Can't get no respect from the wife. Holy shit. I hope no one's opening this video hoping like, ooh, been waiting on this parts video. I'm going to gain so much insight. Ooh. No, it's as bad as it ever was, but you're here for the memes, I think. So we've talked about the way that you can use parts to obviously move your track along. That's what they were made for, right? They were made for moving your track along and allowing you more than just 8 tracks, right? Functionally, it gives you, what's 8 times 4? 32, I think, that you can spread across your patterns to do with what you will. Something else you can do, another thing that it affords you, is different ways to do your scene performance dumbfuckery. Your scene performance dumbfuckery. And that's useful. Something to keep in mind with parts that I think is equally important in terms of knowing what they do is knowing what they don't do. And what they don't do is change things like pattern information. Pattern information is like steps on the sequencer, for example. And why that's really important to understand, why it's so crucial to understand what parts do and don't affect, comes up in my next reason why parts are fun and cool and you should use them and understand what they do, is that you can save parts, right? If I go to function, part, edit, let's save this part. Part 3 is saved. Okay, What does that mean? Well, it means that we can do more fun performance stuff. Now, if you're familiar with the Digatone or the Digattack, they have this fun Control-All feature where if you hold, I think it's Function, and start turning knobs, it'll affect everything. And then you can reload your pattern, and it's a really cool performance thing. And so the Octatrack doesn't have that necessarily, at least to my knowledge. I'm going to say that with brazen confidence, and someone's going to comment, it does. It does have it. It's in the manual, which you should read. And I'll say, I don't know how to read. My wife uploads my videos for me. How do you get to youtube.com? I don't know. I look at the keyboard and it's just a bunch of fucking glyphs.
Gotta stop talking about your wife.
I'll never stop talking about my wife. You know, especially in these days. Bring it in for a second. We're going to have a little talk. We're going to have a little podcast talk. In this day and age, when the American dream is being threatened by anti-fascist protesters, you really got to hold fast to Queen and country, the Queen being your wife and the country being the music that you listen to. Any Tim McGraw fans in the chat?
Yes.
So when socialist Joe Biden comes to take away your wife and your Tim McGraw, you got to say, no, commie. Capitalists own me. The only person I give my labor to is Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk.
Oh my God.
I'll let him put a chip in my brain. I'll let him put his fist in my ass. I'll let him... Elon, strictly speaking, I'm not allowed to be into that gay shit, but I want a Cybertruck so bad, Elon, and I can't afford it. Now, the socialists are trying to sell me on universal basic income, but I won't do it. I won't take handouts from the government, but I will take a hand in from you. Your fist in my butt for a Cybertruck.
Oh my God.
Anyway, being married is cool, so... That's staying in. In full transparency, sometimes when I'm recording something, I'll finish saying what I'm saying and be like, that was fucking stupid. I'm going to edit that out. I am not. Future Daniel, look me in the fucking eyes. Look at what you actually look like and look me in the eyes. I'm not editing that one, bud. That one's staying in. And I hope it alienates people. I really do. Okay. So... maybe that feature's in the Octatrack, maybe it's not. I don't know. I don't care. What you can do in the Octatrack is more better. You can save parts, and then you can go to fucking town affecting machines, and then you hit reload, and buddy, home base, you're back. So practically, what do I mean by this? Let's go to part 2, because it's a little more typical. Let's go to part edit, save the part, it's saved. Okay, so now, any change at all that I make to machine parameters, effects parameters, sample assignment, scenes, etc., etc. When I hit reload part, it should take me back to where my last saved state is. Oh, that's fucking annoying. So let's test that hypothesis. Let's go and turn the fucking lo-fi way up on this. Let's distort it. Where's the... here's what we can do. My favorite. And then reload it. And you're back. Pretty dang neat. So that's another really, really, really cool thing about parts. Now, is that all the ways that you can use parts? Certainly not, I'm sure. Is that all the ways that I have used parts in this particular track? Yes. So let's review really quick. Because this is, to me, my hope is that this can be a primer for how to start using parts. And then you can hit me up down there. Well, don't hit me up down there. I'm married. Hit me up down in the comments section where we can have good Christian American discourse. And you can tell me the way that you've found out, the creative ways you've done it. Because I'm sure you can get way crazier than I am. This is just really base level stuff so that I was able to wrap my head around it. Hopefully, I have been able to adequately explain it to you. You can use them to obviously have identifiable parts in your song, intro, verse, chorus, breakdown. You can cry while you do it if you want. You can change the way that you process samples across patterns without destroying what you've done in the first pattern, right? You can have dynamic processing of samples, and you can change the way that you perform your scene changes on your master with access to way more scenes than you'd usually have, which is also incredibly useful. And then finally, you can do that reloading parts thing as a performance tool. That's what parts are, as I have come to understand them. I always get so annoyed when I'm editing my videos because I say, I think that's it. And then there's six more minutes of me just talking. But I think that is it. I think that's all I have. Maybe a little underwhelming. I thought I could maybe do more cool stuff with parts than I discovered I could. But to be fair and balanced, I feel like I've gotten a lot better as an Octatrack user through using parts. It really forces you from the get-go, if you're like me anyway, to think about where your track is headed and to think about the steps you need to take to get there. Like for me, I knew that I wanted a big build up to that 808. So a lot of risers, a lot of build. And then I wanted it to hit really hard. So I knew that I would need different effects on the track to have distortion. And then I wanted a breakdown, and you get it. You get how it goes from there. But also something you could do is do what I would normally do, which is just build out a pattern without thinking about song structure at all. And then think to yourself, okay, now how can I spread this across 4 parts and highlight the good parts and lead up to and lead into big moments as best as I can using dynamic scenes, dynamic sample processing, different turnarounds, different performance tools. How can I take this one pattern I've made and turn it into a full song, right? That's like a classic thing that I've talked about on this channel quite a bit. And so that's what I think parts are the most useful thing for. They help you think about one pattern as a full song. They help you think about how to turn one pattern into a full song. And I think that's incredibly useful when a common question I get is someone saying, how do you take one pattern and turn it into a full song? And I like to meme and say, I don't. I just play with one pattern over and over, and then I'm like, that's fun. I'm done now. Bye. But if you really do want to turn a pattern into a song, you're gonna have to use parts. It's a necessity. Unless you're doing something very minimal, you're gonna want to have a lot of moving parts. And if you want to have a lot of moving parts help you move. Whoa. Tell me I shouldn't major in marketing. If you want to make a track with a lot of moving parts, use parts. They'll help you move. What's a good last name for a bro?
Davidson.
No, that's too intellectual. Single syllable. I'm Chet Brick. I sell visions. I'm an entrepreneur. If you want a song with a lot of moving parts...
Wait, Chet definitely doesn't know how to say entrepreneur.
It's the only big word he knows.
Oh, okay. Women. Am I right?
Women. Not understanding Chets. Anyway, I don't know, man. That's it. I don't know if this is going to stick around. I don't know if you want to look at my face for 30 minutes. I don't. It's been really hard to look at my face for 30 minutes, but maybe that's just the kind of reflection and self-love I need. Tell me if you hate it. Be mean about it. Say, Octadad, I respect the knowledge you give me. I respect the facts. I respect the insight that you lend and the safety that you make me feel, not just as a musician, but as a person. You make me a better man, or woman, or non-gender identifying person in between. But you're ugly as fuck, my man. Please don't make me look at your face. That's a perspective I'm not ready for. Maybe when I'm older. But for now, yuck. Say that. Something like that anyway. And it'll hurt my feelings, but facts don't care about your feelings. I read that on Twitter. You heard this? Facts don't care about your feelings.
I read that on Facebook.
That's a weird crossover, Ben Shapiro and TikTok boys. Let's say... Hypothetically. Anyway, editing Octadad is gonna come in hot and give a bunch of love to my patrons. Special shout out to Null Style for giving me that sample. It's super cool. Mad respect for someone wanting me to sample Cornel West. And it was easy because it wasn't musical and it made my shit sound more cool. Other $10 patrons, take that as an example. Andrew, with your fucking Wolfpack horn sample. It was difficult, my man. Someone told me it was a mime type beat. A wiggly mime music. And they weren't wrong. That's the distressing part. Anyway, fucking, this is what I mean. I said the video's over and it's been another 5 fucking minutes. The video's over now. Go home. Go.
Get out of my house.
Get out of my house. My messy, messy house.
Hey.
Women, right, fellas? Can't clean up a mess that I made. Like and subscribe. Hey, editing Octadad. Just want to say thanks for watching and sticking with me through what I'm sure was maybe a bit of a frustrating video to watch. Lots of rants, lots of rambles. Hopefully some content enough to offset the time needed to get to it. As I said, I want to thank the awesome people that are supporting me on Patreon. I want to thank Andrew, Ghost Boner, Null Style, Vasily, Matthew, Brian, and Ian, 2 new patrons. Glad to have you. And finally, as always, my mom. Thank you, Mom. Everybody drop a thank you, Mom, in the comments for me. I'm your Octadad, so I guess she's your Octagrandma. On the topic of future content, not content about the future, but content that will arrive in the future, I think the next video is not going to be about the Octatrack. At the very least, it's going to be not Octatrack specific. I am thinking about maybe doing a video on my process in making ambient music because it's a subject I don't think is covered enough, really. I can definitely show how I make ambient music on the Octatrack, but I think I want it to apply to a broader scope of people who want to make ambient music but don't have access to a $1,400 sampler. So yeah, I think that's probably my plan. Exactly the form it takes, I'm not quite sure yet, but probably going to take a week off to focus on school and family and stuff, and then the week after that we'll hopefully have that for you. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for the awesome support. It's kind of been unreal to me to see the growth of this channel rocket the way that it has, and the Patreon is, I mean, extra surreal. Special shout out to the EasyBot Discord who encouraged me to make a Patreon and were among my first patrons. Nicest people in the world. Go over to his channel. I can't imagine you found my channel and don't know about his, but EasyBot makes really amazing focused tutorials, which is suffice to say completely the opposite of mine. So if you're done with my scatterbrained memery, go check him out. Super focused, incredibly nice guy. So I think that's it. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope everyone's staying safe. Hope everyone is finding time in this crazy world to sit down, make a 4-bar loop, listen to the 4-bar loop for an hour and go, that's bad, and turn off their machine and go to bed. I know that's what I'm doing. I hope you're doing it too. This is your Octadad telling you I love you like the sun loves its little tiny flowers. Hugs and kisses. Take care.